Hey guys, welcome to our YouTube Live. I have Chris Conroy here from Dad Training, and I'm excited to have him on. Him and I have a lot in common. We're dads, we have beards, we love training, we love this country, so I think it'll be a good conversation. So, Chris, I'm just going to have you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Chris Conroy. I'm a dad now of three daughters, which has come on unbelievably fast, and life moves a lot faster than we think. But my wife and I have been together for almost 13, 14 years now, married for a little over 7, and have just kind of slowly started to build our family and build a life together. And this dad training thing is something that we've actually done together over the course of our 13 plus years together, but really the culmination of it now being able to share it and do what we do on there. And obviously it's led us to connecting on this one. So that's
That's
kind of
awesome, man.
my background. Yeah.
Cool. And what got you into strength and conditioning? How'd you choose that route?
As an athlete, kind of my whole life, I mean, battling the ups and downs of growing up, trying to train like an athlete and train just in all the sports that we chased when we were younger, and then kind of figuring out what we were good at and what we wanted to do. It's always been something that's at the heart of what I do. I mean, I want to say I really got into it after college. I mean, I was a D1 athlete, but it wasn't until after college that I really kind of sunk my teeth into what I wanted to do and really started to train. And then I got into the CrossFit world completely accidentally back in 2016, 2017. Kind of fell into that. I don't want to call it a trap because it was good to me, but did CrossFit for a little while. That satisfied the competitive edge for a little bit, and that kind of redefined my training for a little while, but led me into where I am now. And that is where all this dad training started with kids of like, you can do whatever you want, but at the end of the day, you got to train
I think
for
we
the
might be
priorities
having a
that are in
little
front of you and
technical
stuff that matters.
difficulties.
And that's where this really kind of took off. Whoa.
Sorry, Chris. I think
Did we lose you?
you froze on us.
Hey, you there now?
Now I am. Yep.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
There we go. Sorry, I got collegiate athlete, and then I got to the CrossFit side of things, and then I lost you.
That's it. Just, CrossFit was great for me at the time. And, from I think I was really in the heart of it from 2017 to about 2019 was when it was kind of in its peak for me. But I'm grateful for it just in that it taught me a whole different side of what training meant, but it kind of led me to where I am now. And that is, there's a lot of things you can train for and there's things that can occupy your focus for training. But at the end of the day, when priorities start to shift and you really have the stuff that matters when it comes to family and kids and health and longevity, the training switch kind of flips and you got to adjust to it. And that's where, I've kind of settled into the strength and conditioning being a part of life and kind of meant for everything that's going forward as opposed to chasing who we used to be as athletes.
So that's a great point because I'm in this similar stage of life. I used to compete in strongman. Just did my first powerlifting meet last summer. But how has training changed for you through the years? Obviously, you competed in CrossFit, and now being a father and balancing all those things and your full-time job and things like that. What does your training look like now?
I mean, some of it's similar, a lot of it's a little bit different, but I think the biggest thing is how I choose to let it define me. I think going back to how I used to compete and, you train for an athlete, it's very self-centered. I don't mean self-centered in the terms of like myopic, but when you train for you. Everything we used to do, whether it's strongman or CrossFit or training for, there's a period of life where I was training for the U.S. bobsled team, trying to make that like your training becomes what you're doing and who you are and how you train. And I think, trying to chase that once priorities shift and you have different responsibilities, that was where my kind of the scale tipped the other way of like, all right, well, if I'm going to spend this time training, which I love doing, like I love investing in myself. I love training. I love lifting. I love the grind of it. Like, I don't think that leaves us like the competitive side with ourselves. I don't think that goes anywhere, but it's how can I apply that to be better for the version of myself that I need to be for everybody else that I'm responsible for. And I think that was when I had my first daughter, the shit that I used to chase and the stuff that I would used to prioritize for training, like just straight up didn't matter anymore. Like my wife and my kids, it did, if we were going on a walk, it didn't matter how much I was snatching or how much I was deadlifting or anything like that. All of a sudden it became like, if I put myself in a bad spot and get hurt and I can't do the things that I need to, then what's the point of it in the long run, right? Then it just becomes more of this like selfish chase of, hey, I want to do this for me. I want to be competitive, but is it something that's actually going to bring me up and what I'm responsible for outside of just the gym and my training in and of itself?
Yeah, that makes sense. And for your training, when do you do it, and how many days a week do you do it? All things like that.
I'm an 8 day a week kind of guy, unfortunately. No, my mornings are my period. So my big thing has just become I train while they sleep. So during the week, I work a full time job that isn't this training or anything like that I love. So I'm out of the house relatively early, and the early morning hour has become my world. I'm up right around 4 o'clock and then train. Everything's usually wrapped up by 6, and I'm out of the house, if not a little bit earlier. So that's kind of where my training lives now, which is the opposite of what it used to be. I mean, I remember giving shit to the guys that used to train in the morning, thinking that I was, when I was really in it, it was an afternoon thing. I'd go through my work day and then the evening, and that would be all the real heavy training sessions. And now it's the exact opposite. The mornings are where I get all my stuff done for me.
And in the mornings, I know, at least for me, training in the mornings, you're usually nobody's up at that hour. So you're not going to get pinged by your wife to pick up a Kroger order or a Publix order or something like that, and
Yep.
groceries and things. Is that part of your drive, that that's your time
Yeah,
to yourself?
that's 1,000%. And I think like we actually, my wife and I were laughing about it this morning. We had a rough night last night. One of our daughters ate something that didn't agree with her, and she was up here and there. I mean, we barely got any sleep, but I still got up and got the training done and got out of the house this morning. My favorite part about having the gym is it is my chance to kind of do me and hammer at what I want to, and I'm very kind of like tuned in when I'm doing it. But by the same token, if something were to happen like it did this morning, I'm there, and I can be there. It's not like I'm at a gym. It's not, and that was the onus for what we built out here. And I think, it kind of goes back to one of the big mental things for me is, I mentioned that my wife and I have been doing this for a while, even before we were married. When we first moved in together, we really did start building out this gym. We lived in a little shitty apartment north of Boston, but we had a mat and dumbbells, and we started doing some home workouts together, and that kind of fed into me doing the CrossFit thing. But she was always one that worked out at home, and it became this kind of like ground for us. Like, this is our chance to do it together. Whether I was doing CrossFit or training in the gym or not, we started building back then. We still have the same adjustable dumbbells that we started with. We still have the same mat. It's been kind of a slow build over 10 years. And then once we built our house about 3.5 years ago, the pieces all finally came together. We had some of them in storage. We were storing them in our old place underneath the shed. And now we finally have a place for it all to be. But it was the goal for us long term to have a space where we could train at home, be here for not just each other, but long term for the kids, have them see us train and see us work out. And now we're kind of living it, which is cool to see the investment pay off.
That's awesome. And there's a lot of people out there, dads or just anybody out there, that they may want to have a garage gym, or maybe they have a garage gym or a basement gym, but it's so convenient that they tend to push things off, and then they end up not training, and then their treadmill becomes a coat rack. And what would you say to those type of people, like, that want to do it, but then they can't get started and they just fall into a rut?
Yeah, I mean, it comes up a fair amount, and I don't, I don't say this from an ivory tower or anything like that. I mean, this genuinely is somebody who's kind of like tried to figure it out myself along the way. Is if you have stuff at the house, you can make do with it. That's kind of one of the things that we program for the dad training stuff. Is there's always a 30-minute, less than 30-minute workout with minimal equipment that we post every day, because at the end of, I mean, shit happens, life happens, stuff comes up. Just because you only have a set of dumbbells doesn't mean you can't get a workout in. You can go for a run, you can do burpees. I mean, there's a million things that you can do. What it comes down to is the gut check of like, am I willing to do something to stay on track and push me in that direction, as opposed to looking at it from that perfect umbrella. I know everybody always shits on New Year's resolutions, but the reality behind New Year's resolutions isn't that people aren't willing to do the stuff or anything like that. It's just everybody has a perfectionist mentality of how they're going to go about it. They have this perfect idea of like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start, I'm going to do this. And then all of a sudden the kid gets sick, you don't get up, you miss a day, or you got a Super Bowl party and everybody's eating and you snack on stuff. Now all of a sudden your diet's shot to shit. Like, it's the perfectionist mentality that gets in our way of, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just got to be something, So if you are one of those guys who is starting a home gym, or you look at, a guy like the only reason I know how to do this gym stuff is because I've gone through it and figured out what I want to do, and then gone after those certain pieces. It's not like all of this just like store bought and I came in and I'm applying it. It's like, all right, well, the assault runner is a perfect example. If Meredith and I wanted a treadmill, we saved some money, tried to figure out what is the best option for us to have a treadmill. The girls are going to be here. We have two daughters. Like, I wanted to still get some runs in, but if I go run around the neighborhood, I'm not here. Same thing for that. So, we decided that the assault runner was the one that she would enjoy, I would enjoy, and kind of came to that decision together. And then that piece got added. So going back to it, like for those guys that are in a position now of like, okay, I have a few things and I want to continue to build it out, figure out what you want to prioritize and then figure out how you can apply it and use it towards what your larger goal is, and then start chipping away and going at it. I put a post up a little while ago of like the top 5 things I would get for a home gym to start. And it's like kettlebells, a box, bands, stuff that you can do and use in multiple different areas of fitness, no matter what it is, and start to build it out from there. And then if you feel like there's something you're really missing, like you want to get a power rack or a barbell, like that's the next step. Then you can start doing strength stuff. You can start squatting, you can start deadlifting. You want to get a bench, now all of a sudden you got box squats, bench. I mean, there's it's like the slow addition of it, and figuring out what you want to apply it for and go about it that way, as opposed to getting it and then trying to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, because one of the questions I was going to have was, yeah, what do you recommend as far as equipment? But no, that makes total sense. And I like how you said the 30-minute kind of workouts programmed every day, because we all know those curveballs of life are going to get thrown at us, whether it's family, whether it's whatever. So getting something in, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect.
Yeah,
that's why I've gravitated towards more of a total body split, as opposed to everybody started, I'm sure you were probably similar, like bodybuilding style, upper lower splits, things like that. And we talk about it all the time. Yeah, that works. It's worked for a lot of people through the years. But as you age and as you get more responsibilities, curveballs are going to be thrown at you. So if you constantly miss that lower body day, weeks in and weeks out, like that throws off your whole program. Whereas if you do total body training, even if you're on a 3-day split, you're doing total body every single day. So
still getting something.
You're still getting something in. So
yeah, we came up this morning with one of the guys that's part of the dad training team. The workout was a 25-minute EMOM, and he only had 15 minutes. He still got 15 minutes in, and he gave it everything he had for 15 minutes, and he went about his day. It's still better than nothing. It's like you're not just scrapping the full 25 because you can't get all of them. It's like, what can you do? I think that's one of those things where we have these conversations, and the natural inclination is to say like, well, I can't do that, right? I don't have a full gym. I can't do that. All right, well, what can you do? Right? Can you get 10,000 steps a day? Can you stop putting shit food in your face? Like, can you tell me what you can do? And then let's build it from there, as opposed to the opposite, going back to that perfectionist thing of like, well, I can't do this. It's like, all right, well, you keep looking at it that way, you're just going to stand still the entire time.
100%. One thing I like to tell people too is like find ways to get workouts in your daily life, like sneaking in. Everybody's got to, for the most part, it's going to mow their lawn. I'll tell people, I know I do it myself. I want some extra cardio. I'll throw a weighted vest on and mow my lawn. It's got to get done anyway.
All yard work gets done in a weighted vest.
Exactly. So I try to tell people to do that as well. But yeah, no, that's awesome.
I'm so far past giving a shit what people think about me in a weighted vest. Like when we were up north of Boston, I used to mow. We had a little house that we moved into. We had our first daughter. It was a rental house up there, and we had a yard. And I mean, it was tiny. It was a postage stamp north of Boston. But I used to put the vest on and mow that, and I just continued to cross cut it until I hit like 3 miles or 4 miles.
Exactly. That's awesome.
You get past what you're worried about looking
Absolutely.
like, and it's what it's for. Yeah, those ruck mows are. It's a great way to balance it. You got to do it anyway. You might as well.
Exactly. Might as well make it a workout.
Yep.
And I'm sure the same thing. I've seen your posts, like even turning a stroll around with the family, pushing the stroller around, throw a ruck on, like get something out of it. You're still spending time with the family, and you're sneaking in some workouts.
That's where that's where dad training really started for me. Is when we had our first daughter right around the time that everybody got locked up back in 2020. She was born literally right as the whole world shut down. And, our gym closed down. We had some stuff at home, but all of a sudden my wife only had 6 weeks of maternity leave at the time. And she went back and she was on calls. And our oldest daughter, who's 5 now, I mean, she would hear my wife's voice and she'd lose her mind. So what I started to do was I'd take her out in the stroller. It was a Bob jogger or, whatever we had at the time. And I would turn those into my workouts. And that's where, I started calling them, as a joke, Meredith and I would call them dad training. I'd go around and she would fall asleep and I'd continue to go until she woke up. And I started throwing a backpack on, and then I put some weight underneath those Bob jogger sleds. And that's really where it became like, all right, if this is our time and my chance to not just help our family, help my wife, help her get a nap, kind of bond with my daughter, that's what the training is all about. It, became less about the snatch and the muscle up stuff and like, all right, what am I going to do for me that's going to help move the needle forward for who I need to be and who I want to be for the family as a whole.
That's awesome. And why do you train? Obviously, you love it. It's always going to be in you. But like from a family perspective, your kids. I've seen videos of your kids
Yep.
on dad training. Like, what has that done for you?
Hopefully you haven't seen their faces. That's my main goal, is to try to keep
Yeah,
their faces off of there.
yeah,
But
I agree.
yeah, I think it goes back to Meredith and I, my wife Meredith. Like, we want to set the example and be the example. And I think, when it comes to the training and stuff, the last thing we're ever going to do is force our girls to do anything. But the more they see us, and the more they see us do it, and the more they see us enjoying it, the more they want to hop in. It's like they want to hop on the rower, they want to hop on the treadmill, they want to do squats with us. It's this natural evolution of the example that you want to set for the generation. For us, it's the girls and who we want to build them into long term, and help them grow in that sense. And it's like it's one of those things where we call ourselves kids raising kids. A lot of the times we don't know what we're doing, but at the same time, if we can kind of set the example and be that for them, that's really the root of what we want to do. My wife was on the Pelotons moving her legs up until all three girls were born. It's a huge priority for us to be healthy long term. We have active parents and great role models in our life. So we want to continue and kind of push that
That's
boulder up
awesome.
the hill of just kind of being the example of what it means to be healthy.
That's awesome. And I've seen a lot of videos of you carrying objects, throwing sandbags on your shoulder, walking with it, sandbag get ups and stuff. What is the inspiration for that type of unconventional stuff? Like to us, it's more conventional, but like to the average gym goer who traditionally trains with dumbbells, barbells, things like that, what's your inspiration for those odd implements in
I
training?
honestly, I'm afraid to say this out loud, because I don't even want to put it out there to the universe. But like, there's this fear in me of, like, I've been down the road before where I've done stuff in training that's put me in, injured myself or put myself in a tough spot, and it's kept me from doing the things that I want to do in life. And my main goal is to do all of this training so that, kind of the motto that I've built out is, so that if I need to, I can. Right? It doesn't matter if it's helping my father-in-law hoist up a seat into the backhoe, or carrying random stuff or moving furniture. Like, I don't want to ever be in a position where my physical capabilities are kind of limited to what I can do to help and be there. And I think, the sandbag and some of the GPP and the functional stuff has really become a huge focus over the last 4.5 years, understanding how much that is relatable to the rest of the world, moving your spine in different ways and loading it in ways that are unconventional, because life shit happens. Like, every time my daughter, I dry her hair at night and she jumps off the sink and I catch her, and every side, the reaction to catching it, I want to be able to, as long as she wants to. So, kind of training in those, what some people look at as different or unconventional, is more just for me, in my head at least, what I like to apply for the rest of the world. I think the one big adjustment that's kind of I don't know, adjustment's the only word I can really think about it for, is a lot of the things that we want to do now are stuff that we can apply to the rest of the world. Like, we don't really sit down and watch too much TV mindless or anything like that. If we're going to spend our time doing anything, we want it to be something that applies to moving the family forward, or, moving the house forward, or doing stuff around the house, things like that, that can kind of help us build. And if it's the same thing goes for training, and having the gym in the morning here and having this space opens the door for it less to be a hobby and more of a non-negotiable. It's not like we're dedicating X amount of time to drive to the gym or do this and, kind of set that as a time to do something. It's more just ingrained into the schedule of, like, I'm up at 4, I'm down here by 4:30, get the pre-workout in, do whatever training I have for the day, record some videos, kind of build this out naturally with the dad training piece. And we're on to the rest of the day, where we pour out from family to job to everything else that we're responsible for.
Yeah. I know that's a big driving force for me as far as like just training, obviously family. And I think for a lot of people, the easy button is give your kid a Kindle, an iPad, video games, because you're tired from work. I get it. Full-time job. You come home. Sometimes you just want to sit on the couch. Once you sit down, it's over. Your night's over. So how do you mitigate that? Like, obviously you work basically two jobs, and a third job, really your number one job is being a father and a husband. And then you obviously have your two jobs. So how do you kind of prioritize like not having screen time as one of those things?
I go back to, this is completely random, but I came across, Steve Rinella is. So he's got a book called Outside Kids and Indoor World, or Inside World. Well, I forget. I always
You gotta
get
check that out.
the
Okay.
actual title wrong. But I
Yeah.
remember we were living in Boston, And that book came up, and I log a lot of miles in my career. I spent a lot of time behind the wheel. And when I started, the same thing, kind of like applying yourself in those moments where we kind of kill time, using and applying it. I started listening to audiobooks and podcasts, and that was one that I listened to. And the onus of that book, and the whole point was, Steve at one time had a daughter and his wife. They were living in Manhattan, but he was running, his true passion was the outdoor world. There's a section of that book where they talk about walking through Central, what's in the middle of New York, Central Park,
Central Park, yeah,
and foraging for mushrooms. And he knew enough of, like what the mushroom categories were, what was dangerous, what was edible. And he and his daughter would pick mushrooms and then go back and make dinner in their apartment in New York City, in downtown Manhattan, from mushrooms that they foraged. And it was just this like light bulb in my head of, your environment doesn't necessarily have to dictate how you treat things. And I think that is, it's something that stuck with me. And that was before we even had our daughters of, I want them to be outdoor kids in an inside world as much as possible. We go on hikes, they help, we go track deer in the off season or set up cameras, and it's all just the little things of just being outside. When my wife and I settled on this area where we are now, we wanted some land so that they could be out and be in the woods. That was a huge priority for us. So just kind of like trying to set the choices in motion to allow for that long term, but also understanding that like you are the one that dictates how that goes down. And it's more of a lead from the front and lead by example type situation. We're not to that. I obviously I do a fair amount on the phone, with all the training and stuff and posting videos, and I take full responsibility for that, but I do it when they're sleeping. Like that's the one non-negotiable for me, is like the posts that I create and the stuff that I do. It's all very kind of like in line with the day to day, which is something I've tried to build out. Nothing's really orchestrated. It's just I try to document as much as I can and post where I am in the moment and on that day, and kind of like just what I genuinely feel and what comes up. And I have the camera rolling when I'm down here, so when the girls train or when I'm training and they hop in, it's all relatively authentic to what we're doing. But I don't cut that up in front of them. I do that once they go down. So the one thing that in my life my boss said once that I thought was just one of those quotes that you hear and it really hits you, is like, everything's a sacrifice, right? You're going to have to, no matter what, you got to sacrifice something for something else. What are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to give up? And for me right now in this moment, I mean, all the guys that are into the biohacking and all of them, it's for me right now, it's sleep. And that is the one thing that I cut a little bit short. And, I try to make up as much as I can, but that's the one thing I know I can do what I want to do and what I enjoy. I can't do it when they're up, and I don't want them to see me hammering away on the phone and kind of be that example of somebody that's staring at the screen time. It's our chance to be outside and run around and do all that.
Yeah, because it's a great point, because I was going to ask you, like, with having multiple jobs, like, how do you balance? Because there's one thing to be home with your family, and it's a whole separate thing to be present with your family. Just because you're home sitting on the couch, if you're on your phone, that's not present with your wife, with your kids.
Yep.
So you kind of answered my question already, but if you have any other things to add, but like, how do you balance that out? We talked about a little bit before this call, like balancing on things that really there should be no balance to. Like, your family is the most important thing. So how do you just basically do all your work outside of family time, basically? So when they're asleep, and then time with the wife, you'll do it after she's in bed or early in the morning. That's pretty much when you do all that extra editing.
Yeah, pretty much the majority of what everybody sees, at least from me on there, is done between the hours of like 4 to 7:30. The job that I have, that I absolutely love it. I love my full-time job. I have an incredible opportunity in a situation that I truly love and love to dig into. And the one thing I won't do is cut into that with any of the dad training stuff. So my stuff is done primarily in the morning or late at night, like right before bed. Those are my two blocks. So I try to, as much as I don't have any software or like apps or anything that helps me balance the time. It's just more kind of like ingrained into my schedule of how I do it. From the time that I get up until I leave the house, that is my time for the dad training stuff, the posting, the videos, and what I've gotten in the rhythm of, especially with the training and the posting, is the majority of it is either done in that window from like 4 to 4:30 before I start training. I'm drinking the pre-workout and just kind of getting myself set, or right afterwards. And then in the evening, I'll post the videos to YouTube or the training videos from that day, so that I always have kind of like a nonstop log of what's going on, and just naturally build out the content from there. So usually it's I mean, I guess from a posting standpoint or any of the content creation, it's like the day before into the day of, or if I'm really feeling it in that moment, I'll post it, like middle of training. But I try very hard to make sure that everything is separated as it should be. And I think, Ben, you had that line that I just heard it yesterday for the first time, but that's one of the more impactful lines of like, well, you can't balance things that aren't meant to weigh the same. And that's the truth of like, if this is something that I want to do, which I love doing, I love getting up in the morning, I love training, I love connecting with the guys that are up early. I mean, I want to say there's probably 7 or 8 guys that are either done or into their training by the time I start at 4:30. Some of them are in Great Britain. One guy's in Australia, so like they don't really count. But
Yeah.
there's a couple of guys on the East Coast that are hammering through and getting their stuff done. And like that's the one thing that gets me up and at it every single morning is like, fuck, these guys did it. Let's go. And I think that's where it's just become my block of like, all right, this is my time to do it. And then once I shift out of that, it's 100% work. Outside of it, there's some overlap in terms of the posting. Like I really do love sharing what we do at the brewery and the distillery. That's something that is, it's a passion of mine and something that we love to do. But
And I'm actually going to, yeah, I was just going to have you actually talk about that as well, so the listeners can understand what your day job is, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah. I work for a brewery up here in Massachusetts. We have 6 locations now, more of a regional piece, but it's called Treehouse Brewing, and head up the spirits category. So we have a distillery on property that we send product out to for all of our locations, cocktail program, full spirit portfolio. But then the big thing is making whiskey for the long term. So it's a couple days a week that are dedicated strictly to making whiskey. So that's my full-time real life. Yeah. So like, the schedule there kind of depends on, when we're running our mashes, what the distillation side, production side of things. So my schedule does fluctuate, usually the earliest that we're dumping or really moving anything is like 5:30 or 6. So those training mornings are a little bit earlier, they're a little bit shorter, but it's kind of where schedule really kicks off between 6 to 8 on that front.
Gotcha. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then, as I know you said, sacrifice some sleep there. What time do you go to bed, and what time do you wake up?
I wish the wake up, the alarm set for 3:53 every day. That's kind of the hard set. Whether I hit snooze once or twice, it kind of varies, but usually I'm up and out of the room by 4:03. That's kind of the number that I give myself. 4:03 is the time that I want to be up and out, and then I'm usually down in here and training no later than 5. So usually like between 5 and 4:30 and 5 and out by 6. So training sessions are no more than an hour for me these days.
Gotcha. Okay. Nice. And then bedtime, I'm the same way, so you don't have to feel sorry about saying it, because
whenever we can finally close our eyes. Last night it was late. It depends. I think Meredith and I both wish we were in a better routine about getting into bed, but we're in that phase of life where, bedtime kind of dribbles and drags on here and there, but it's the time that we want to spend with the girls. I don't ever want to rush them going down, because those are memories that we're not going to get back. And I think, there's certain things. I put up a post the other day that rocked me was, we have a door upstairs that we take their measurements on, the top of the basement door. And like our daughters both grew an inch in less than a month and a half. And my wife and I just looked at each other. We're like, fuck, it goes so fast. You don't want to rush that time with them. And I don't want any of this or anything that we do to take away from that, So bedtime is kind of weather dependent on what the seas are upstairs and see what time you actually lay down.
So you're averaging what?
Yeah, I usually anywhere between 5.5, 4:30 sometimes, something like that. Anywhere between 4 to 6, pretty standard.
Yeah. I'm in the same boat, man. That's the one thing I sacrifice is the sleep. And again, I get it. Like, you have to have your 8 hours and for optimal recovery and things like that. I'm the same as you. I do something 7 days a week, and it may not be always like training specific.
Right.
Maybe it's hunting, maybe it's fishing, but I'm moving my body. Today it was wiffle ball with my son. Like, as long as I'm moving every single day, I obviously have my training plan, but the sleep goes on the back burner. So anybody listening out there, sorry, that's I sacrifice.
Jimmy, it's one of those things though. It's like it doesn't necessarily, everything that we do doesn't necessarily have to work for everybody. And I think that's the beauty of being able to share and talk through is like, there are some people that need their sleep, and I 1000% respect that. Yeah. There's guys that I know that sleep in and leave and get up and go to work, and then they do their training during the day, like at lunchtime or right after work. Like, everybody has to figure out what it is for them. All we can do is just share what works for us. What doesn't work for me anymore personally, and this is just from experience, is no matter what I tell myself, if I don't get the training or something done in the morning, the chances of it happening in the evening are slim to none because something else has to take its place. Like if I come down here for an hour between 5 and 6, I lose that hour outside or doing something with the girls before dinner or helping Meredith make dinner or making dinner. Like those are the things that I'm just not in this point in life willing to sacrifice. I will not train as opposed to try to squeeze it in one of those other facets, which is some days it's fine. Like there's days you need to reset. And that's something that I really do focus on for me with the training that's been a learning curve is, I was an all gas, no brakes train as hard as you can. But back when I was all gas, no brakes, I had the bandwidth to really focus on recovery and all the different methods and sleep and all of the stuff that like I needed to kind of keep up that pace. Now I don't have those luxuries, and it's by choice. These are the things that I wanted to build out. I wanted to build a family. We wanted to have our daughters. I just don't have the time and the bandwidth for that level of recovery. So the thing that needed to change was my training. And that's where, for dad training and the programming that we do and I program, what I've really tried to capitalize on is like, all right, what is it that I want to do today that's going to put me in a position to be the best version of myself tomorrow and get another session in? And I think that's something that is a huge switch from the way that I used to train of like, I need to go eat all of this right now. If I have to, if I'm going to have the session and I have the time, I need to make it the most worthwhile and push myself to the gills, and I'll deal with tomorrow, right? I'll try to recover. I'll try to eat. I'll try to get set. Now it's like, what can I do today to push myself in the moment, but still be ready to get up and do it tomorrow? That's the training that I want to be a part of, right? So that I know that I'm going to push myself, I'm going to get better and kind of keep that trend moving up and to the right, but be ready the next day to continue to build off of that and look at it long term, as opposed to, a mesocycle or a block or anything like that, kind of build the training out that way.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I was going to ask you about that. Obviously, playing a sport in college. I don't. Did you have a strength coach in college?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Okay.
I
So
still I
obviously,
still talk to him every once. I mean, not tight, but I mean he's
yeah,
pretty good. But yeah,
yeah. So obviously, all the planning was planned by him, building your plan around the conference play, championships, all those things. Then you go and you compete in CrossFit. All of your programming, I'm sure, was probably done by yourself or something like
yeah,
that. But planning and trying to peak for a
yep,
certain event. Whereas now, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not trying to peak for anything because are you competing in anything currently?
no,
Okay.
no,
So now you kind of alluded to it, making sure what you do today allows you to still do something the next day.
mm-hmm.
But I'm sure you still program and have different cycles and like either 12-week cycles or
100%.
whatever
Yep.
it is. So do you find it challenging when you're not competing for something? Because I know a lot of people out there, I'm sure if they don't have a particular event that they're getting ready for, it's tough to be like, well, what do I do? What do I train for? Do I try to build up to a 1 rep max?
Yeah.
Do I try to run a marathon? So I'd just like to hear some of that thought process.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting for me because there's two sides to it. One, the competitive side, I don't. I mean, personally, I know how competitive I am, and I think we all have a competitive side and a drive to us. My level of competition has become very me focused. Like I want to be better than I was, or training long term. And there are numbers that I have that I would love to build back to. But what I'm not doing is sacrificing the next day for those numbers. Like I do want to build back to a 500-pound back squat. Do I have it right now? No. Am I closer than I was 6 weeks ago? Yes. Am I closer than I was a year and a half ago? Yes. So like that long-term mentality of figure out what it is you want to prioritize. And like we're all in different phases of life and everybody has different things that they do want to prioritize. Right now, events or competition or anything like that is just not something that's personally on my radar. I have a lot of things that I want to dump into that are not something that is me kind of like physically putting myself in that spot. But my training is still, I have these kind of like goals and stuff that lead me to want to drive. You go through cycles of like, is it more nutrition based? Is it more power focused? And making sure that those align. What I find sometimes is like guys want to cut down and they want to lean out, but they also want to build their back squat up. It's like you can, but are you going to do that in 12 weeks?
Yeah.
You're going to put yourself in a tough spot if you're eating 1,800 calories and still, going through the 90% plus or anything in that realm. So trying to be realistic in terms of what you're going after and kind of just being able to, going back to what I said earlier, is like being able to sacrifice something, right? If I'm building up to, building my bench back up past 350, maybe days of like long rucks or long runs are not going to be as much of a priority. You're going to be eating a little bit more and kind of make sure that the training maps out with what those priorities are. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, if you want to go out and run a marathon, you want to do high rocks, you want to do a triathlon, I'm all for it. But you got to make sure that if you're going to do it, that everything else that you're responsible for is taken care of first. Because going back to that point, it's like those two aren't meant to weigh the same. You're
Yep.
never going to balance them.
Yeah. And actually, the quote, I think I remembered, it was Ryan Horn. He's a strength and conditioning coach. I follow him on social media. I followed his career from afar, but that's where I got that quote from. Where, again, you're talking about work-life balance, but they should never weigh the same. So, just for those of you guys out there, if you're wondering what that quote, so, but yeah, that's a great point. And do you follow your own programming? Like, so the programming, okay, I do the same thing. I follow same deal. So
Yeah, and what I'll do personally is I'll write weeks in advance, and then I'll go through them. And what I'll find is the error in my programming, where like numbers and everything looks great on a whiteboard until you actually go through it. Because the last thing I want to do, and like there's guys that are stronger and fitter and better at certain things than me that follow the programming. But at the end of the day, if it's something that I find myself getting backed up on, I don't want anybody to kind of go through that and do the same thing. So all the programming that I do, I try to stay 2 to 3 weeks ahead of it for what anybody else will see, to make sure that it's something that actually makes sense to kind of, if I'm going to preach, let's get ready for tomorrow. I can't put 2 sessions back to back that, kind of put us in a rougher spot for the third day or anything like that. So that's a huge priority for me to, the long-term side of it. So I do follow more of, if you want to get back to the CSCS side of things, it's more of some undulating periodization than anything else. I've gotten away from linear. I still use percentages a fair amount because I think you got to know where you are. And every once in a while, you got to be able to test it. But, I definitely focus more on the undulating side of things and making sure that we are balanced across the board and doing all of it, as opposed to trying to chase. And like to your point, you go through these 12-week cycles or different periods where like there are different priorities. Like we got some guys that want to do Murph right now. We're going to the summer. Everybody wants to lean out. Like the programming will naturally adapt to that as we get closer to whatever it is.
no, that's awesome. Um, Now, as far as I know, hunting is a big part of things that I've seen on social media. You
Yep.
slinging arrows in the backyard and
Oh
things
yeah.
like that. Do you cater your training at all? Like once it gets close to hunting season, hey, you're going to do more time on your feet, more rucking, more.
Well, the tough part, the brutal honesty there is, when it comes to hunting season, the one thing we lose is the morning workouts. Like every once in a while, we'll get up early, but we're out in the woods. We'll get up at 4 and 3 and ruck in, and then you spend out of the morning and then head to work, or full days or whatever it is. So the training kind of changes there. I still have some of the days where we're not out there. You just go into more of like the full body side of things. Like we're definitely not running body part splits when it comes to hunting season, but leading up to it, a lot more rucking, a lot more endurance, a lot more just like GPP strength. Like one of my main goals in life was to take a buck and then carry it out. And that's something that was a huge thing for my brother-in-law. He was there that day, and I mean, we had a hell of a time carrying the deer that I showed you out on the wall. I mean, that was, to this day, like I'd do my ruck marathon again before I had to drag that bastard out. And it was just, like that was one of those things where like I really wanted to carry him, and I put myself in a position to do it. And it was probably like teeter on the brink of what I was physically able to do, but like that's the fun of it, dragging a deer, being in the backwoods. Like you gotta know what's around you, but you got to know what your capabilities are. And there's been times, especially with my brother-in-law, where we've pushed ourselves to the point of like you start getting cramps in your legs when you're 10 miles deep. It's like, ooh, where are we going with it? So you got to be able to know your body and be able to train for that. I think the one thing that I always found with training is the more you do, the more you learn you can do,
Mhm.
which obviously is, it sounds pretty straightforward, but realistically, like you don't know what you're capable of until you get to like kind of push to that point. But you can't push to that point unless you're working towards it and you're comfortable kind of psychologically of pushing to that point. You don't know, your body can do a lot more than you think it can, and it can do a lot more than your mind will tell it to. So
And that goes back to you also, like doing the sandbag get ups, the sandbag carries, things like that, because I love that stuff. For everybody that I work with, I'll throw it in there as well, because it's very rare in life that you're going to think about the same verbal cues of, I got to keep my back flat. It's got to be a perfect deadlift. That's not realistic in the real
yeah,
world. If the kid's on the ground, you're not thinking about that. Or if there's a deer on the ground and you got to sling it to your shoulders, you're not thinking about that. But that what you've done in training, that you're probably capable of doing that. And I think it's just being ready for anything at any given point in time. So
Yeah, yeah. It's
yeah,
the so if you need to, you can. But
exactly.
to the same point, like I do a handful of guys that I train one on one, and the first thing that I send them when they sign on is a sandbag. The 100-pound log sandbag with some
That's
handles, just
awesome.
something that's versatile for
That's
us to
awesome.
be able to roll with, whether they have one or not. You're going to get one, and that's something that you prioritize it just because it has so many carryover pieces. Like one of the things that we do at night is we'll sing to our middle daughter, and she weighs I think she's like 30. I forget what the last doctor's appointment was, but like it's right around like 40 to 50 pounds. And I go to say goodnight, and I carry her to her bed, and every night I go from a dead sit holding her to standing to carry her, and it's like that is truly a sandbag getup. I mean, it's not necessarily with the weight, but if I can do that with 150 pounds, I know I can do it as long as my daughter will let me. So that's kind of
I
the
That's
priority.
awesome. I do the exact same thing. I'm trying to do like the Milo and the calf. Like
Yeah.
just keep throwing your kids on the back as they get bigger. You just keep walking them up the staircase, and hopefully I can continue doing that as long as possible. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it sounds goofy to say it, but there's going to come a point where they don't want us to anymore, and I want to be able to until that point comes.
100%.
So
That's awesome, man. I love your philosophy on training, on life. It's we're very much aligned the same. So
yeah,
that's
I mean, the
awesome.
hunting, the hunting thing, and that is the one thing that I'll admit right now. I'm a big deer hunter. I'd love to go out west. We haven't had a chance to, just for a lot of reasons. Obviously, with 3 kids, and my brother-in-law's got 3 under 7 or 8 now too. So life is not we're not necessarily in a position to go out west. That's a goal long term, but we're big into whitetail hunting up here in the Northeast. The one thing I have not gotten into and won't for a little while is bird hunting, because like I know my personality, I know I want to dive into it, and like I just can't with everything that we have going on with all we do. That's just something that I won't. Like I got buddies that ask to go turkey hunting or duck hunting, and the answer is no. Like I don't want to add that to my plate right now. It's not that I want to, but it's just like if I say yes to that, I'm going to have to say no to something else, and it's just not something I want to prioritize.
Yeah, that's awesome. And speaking of prioritization, do you have like some benchmark like standards that you always try to maintain regardless of the training cycle? Like I know I've talked about it before. I have certain like relative to my body weight strength
Yeah,
standards like I'm trying to maintain until I'm in the dirt.
yeah.
And we've done posts about it as well, but I'm curious if you have those minimum standards like no
Yeah,
matter.
I have minimum standards. I think some of them have naturally changed and evolved. Like the one that's really fallen off. I mean, could I do it right now? I would hope so, but I haven't trained it. It's like a 225 snatch. Like that's something that was a huge priority for me for a long time with CrossFit and Olympic lifting. I loved it. Like the power and explosiveness. I I mean, there are certain numbers out there. Like I definitely want to get back to a 500-pound squat. That'd be big. That's something I want to maintain, but never dropping below 405 is just something that personally that I've built to. But what's interesting about those numbers, and this is something I harp on a lot, is the numbers that we've earned and the stuff that I've done in my life. Like I'm the only one that knows what it took for me to get there, and I think that's where a lot of guys look at different numbers and they look at what guys are capable of, and they start to kind of like play this comparison game where you don't know what somebody did to earn that number. I think the natural side of it is to look at somebody who's got like a 5 pound, 500-pound deadlift, and you're like, holy fuck, I want that. And at the end of the day, like you don't know what that guy did to earn that, right? And to earn and to keep that. So there is a kind of like you see these posts of like every guy should be able to do this. It's like we don't all come from the same background. We all haven't been able to do this. But if you have a number that you want to chase and that becomes a priority, you better have the stepping stones and the right prioritization to figure out how to get there. But there are certain things that I've accomplished that I definitely don't want to drop below. Like a 315 bench, 405 squat, 450 deadlift, stuff that like I've made sure to personally maintain with the programming. Are they numbers that are going to shock the world? No, but like it's just something that personally I know those are the numbers that I kind of want to keep and make sure that I maintain. But by the same token, if I start training for something else or something else becomes a priority and they slip, I'd work pretty hard to get those back. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's the same thing with me. I try to maintain for squat at least double body weight squat, 1.5 times body weight bench press, 2.5 times deadlift, and I've really gone down the rabbit hole with weighted pull-ups because I keep talking about this, so I'm curious your opinion on it. Like in my years, I've been in strength and conditioning close to 20 years now. And it's rare that you see like people program pull-ups, but like I don't really see a lot of like purposeful, like weighted pull-ups. When
Yeah.
you think about like in real life, you're more likely going to have usefulness for a weighted pull-up, like pulling your family out of something. If you're climbing a tree stand with your hunting gear on your back, like you have to pull yourself up, things like that. So I really tried to prioritize and gone down this rabbit hole of pull-ups. So I want to maintain at least half my body weight. So I'm right around 200 pounds. So at least 100-pound pull up, things like that. And again, to your point, sometimes people are like, well, it's not realistic for some people out there. What do we
I
got?
don't know if you can read that. That was this morning's
Weighted,
programming.
weighted pull up.
Yeah, right
Nice.
there.
There we go.
First thing.
We're on
Yeah.
the same page.
Big on the weighted pull-ups. But like, that comes back to like the percentage and RPE. I think there's a lot of ways to train. And I personally, I'll say it right now, I don't think there is one perfect way to train for anybody. I don't think there's all the science-based stuff. Like there is, if you figure out what you want to do and it gives you the opportunity to be the best version of yourself outside of there, it doesn't matter if it's bodybuilding, high rocks, marathons. Like I personally don't care what it is. You got to figure out what it is you want to do. Like the power lifters of the world, the Olympic weightlifters, like there isn't one perfect way to do it.
100%.
But to your point, like my whole thing is if you don't know how much you can do for a 1 rep max weighted pull up, how much of your body weight can you pull up? And I can go the other way too. If you're at a point where you can't do one physical pull up, what is the band tension that allows you to get that? What is the weight that you have to add on that machine to get one full pull up? Right. That's a great bench press or a benchmark of like where you are on that fitness journey. Cause like grip strength, ability to hold yourself. I mean, there's a ton that go into the pull side of things.
Body fat obviously plays a
Yeah,
huge role.
I'm a huge proponent of like, all right, how much can you pull to get your chin over the bar? And I don't calculate body weight. I'm saying like how much can you hang from your body and
Yeah.
pull up? And then from there, if you don't know how much you can, how are you supposed to train against it? Right. So it goes, what I was trying to say is there are certain things that I'm a big fan of percentages for, of like
Yeah.
knowing where you're at and training against it. But
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily have to be that linear periodization of like, every 75% this week, 80% this week, 87%. Have an idea and use the percentages so that you can train so that when you do retest, that number is higher. And I think that's where you figure out where your benchmark is or the 1 rep max weighted pull up. I mean, I want to say last year, my buddy and I did it at the start of 2024. I want to say mine was like 67 or 70 pounds. And then I trained over the course of the year and it was over 85. And we're still training. So I get to do it again. I don't know where it is, but it's like I'm training against using those max numbers to train against it. Cause I'm a huge fan of doing it that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I
Yeah.
like how you show that you're in your program of weighted pull-ups. We're on the same page there.
Yep.
So
Yeah, that was literally that was Thursday morning. Yep.
that's awesome.
So
And as far as your programming, because I run into this as well, I try to cater my programming to minimal equipment. Yeah, it's great if you have every bell and whistle. That's awesome. And I'll give my athletes feedback and my clients feedback of like, hey, if you have access, one of the first questions I ask, like, what equipment do you have access to? But for my training team, I most of the time try to just cater to the garage gym lifter. And is that similar with you as far as your program design?
yeah, I think the one thing that I go back and forth on it because it's hard because what I think we all struggle with is we want to be able to, like, for me personally, I enjoy training and I enjoy coaching and I enjoy helping people. Like that's something that like I have this deep down in me. I want to help, and like for me, what I struggle with the most is like the financial side of it. Is I want to help everybody, but at the same point, like it's what we do, and like I think there's something to be said about that. But my my philosophy behind it is you can't cater to everybody because you end up leaving the people behind that you need to help. It's kind of like triaging a scene. Like when you walk up and you got, XYZ, like you know who you need to triage, who's gone, who, like that, not to make that a situation, but,
Yeah.
like it's triaging what you want to go after. And for me, what I do with the program, not to plug the dad training side of it, but
Yeah.
what
No.
I do in this team subscription is every single day, there's a 60-minute program that I call Brick that's built out for full gyms, like conventional gyms, CrossFit gyms, guys that have full access to everything, like their full garage gym. That's the 60-minute session. And then the second one that's released that day is something that's similar to it, but it's less than 30 minutes with minimal equipment. So they kind of follow the same thing, but you have one and the other that we put in no matter what every day. So we call it brick, and then mortar is the 30 minutes or less with minimal equipment.
I like
So
that.
what I have, kind of like the promise that I give to the guys that hop in and train with us from the subscription side of it is that chat is always open. If you don't have a safety squat bar, like put it in. What do you want to use? So let's just do back squat or do front squat. Like figure out what the alternatives are. Because if like what I don't necessarily want is for somebody to feel alienated. Like if they have a power rack but they don't have a bamboo bar, like we'll figure something out. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't mean you got to scrap the entire thing and then only do mortar for it. Like let's figure out some of the different variations that you can do. But yeah, I'm a big proponent of having both of those options. Cause like, even for me, life on the road, shit gets busy. Like there's times where I don't have that 60 minutes to do the full training session. Like yesterday morning's a perfect example. Wednesday morning, I got up and did a shorter variation for 30 minutes and I was out the door. And that is, I want everybody to have access to that and not lose or feel like you're going to miss. Because like the one thing that I always felt personally with some of these training programs is like you download a 12-week program, right? Call it Olympic lifting, call it CrossFit, call it whatever it is, bodybuilding. You have this 12-week program of like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, rest day 6, day 7, whatever it is. What happens when your kid's sick or you're traveling or you miss a day and you can't work out? Like all of a sudden, what do you do? Do you just skip to day 5? Do you go back to day 3? Like that was one of those things where it always fell through the cracks for me of like, if I'm traveling and life's busy, what do I do? Right. So I wanted to create something that had like, all right, best case scenario, here's what we're going to get done. What's the worst case scenario? Right. What is the worst case scenario? What is the bare minimum that I know I can do that day so that the next day, like, all right, maybe I didn't get that full 60 session in, but I did something similar that's like upper body based. I'm going to get to the cardio piece for the next day. And then you can stay on track and continue to build it and then go from there.
That makes sense.
Yeah. That's just like kind of my personal philosophy with it and what I want to put out there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That makes total sense. I like that secondary option of minimal equipment, whether it's minimal equipment or just minimal time too, because yeah, for everybody you're catering to, and even me too, like you don't want these sessions. Yeah, when you're 20 years old and you have less responsibilities, a 2-hour workout, absolutely send it.
I mean, the amount of time I used to spend in the gym, and that goes back to like that 500-pound back squat. I know what it took for me to get that, and I don't have that. I don't have that time. I don't have the desire to train like that. Like I want to earn it over the long term, but to do it in 12 weeks or 16 weeks or to give myself that time stamp is just for me personally, it's just not realistic to how I train and what I want to do, which, for a lot of guys it can be detrimental in terms of like, well, if I don't have the time to do it, then I'm just going to avoid it altogether. And then you start moving backwards even farther away from something that makes you more frustrated. There's a ton of different psychological ways and routes that it can go, but that's something I want to avoid altogether. And, I think it goes back to what started this all for me is when we had our first girl, like there's the social media, you'd see these voices and like, I didn't feel like anybody was speaking what I was feeling in the moment. Like here I was as an athlete who trained a certain way and held myself to certain standards. And all of a sudden I'm up at 2, I'm up at 4, I'm up at 6, changing diapers and supporting the family. Like I'm not training like I used to, but all I saw on the internet and all that was in front of me was like, you got to be tougher. You got to make time. You got to do this. You got to do that. And it was like, I just didn't have it. Right. And I wanted to be a voice for the guys like us that had a priority and priorities shift. And you still want to be competitive and you still want to have that drive. But at the same point, there's other things in life that are taking precedent. And you want to just kind of like, keep your head on straight and do what is good for you so that it makes you the best version of yourself outside of what you're doing in the gym.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people, they want, when they set a New Year's resolution or a goal, they have to think more about what's the most realistic for their schedule. Yeah, 6-day a week, 7-day a week, like bodybuilding split may sound good on paper, but what are you going to be the most consistent and compliant with? And what are you going to buy into? Because I've seen a lot of programs that are not great programs, but executed incredibly and get great results. So whatever you're going to truly buy into, whatever you can be consistent and compliant with, that will drive results. Because we've seen it, like you've been in strength and conditioning a long time, like it's how the program is executed. Like the program is just an app. It's just a piece of paper without the execution. I tell my team all the time, like if they thank me for the program, like the program is nothing without the execution of it. So I think just being realistic with your situation, life, family, work, all those things, and what is going to be the most consistent and compliant with, I think really is important.
Yeah, and
So
like especially when I've started this with the online stuff, is you want to help everybody, and you just cast this wide net. But the thing that I'll be honest with right now is if somebody comes to me, and it happened about 2 weeks ago, somebody came to me like wanting to get better at CrossFit. Like I'm not in that world. I don't train like that. I know somebody very well that I would love to pass you on to, but like I can't take that on because I know personally that I can't give you that version of me in order to train for what you want. Like maybe it might be better than the situation that they're currently in, but if you're going to do it and you're going to really train, like you got to have somebody that knows what's in it. Like I don't, the CrossFit side of things, I don't know what is in the CrossFit Open right now. Truly, like I don't know what the movements are. I wouldn't know how to train them. I wouldn't know necessarily how to program. I could learn it, but that's just not the stage of life that I'm in. Same thing with powerlifting. If somebody comes to me for a powerlifting program, I know who to send them to, and I have no problem passing it off because I want the best for them, even if it's not coming from me. And that's just something that I think I've learned over the last year and a half as I've continued to grow this thing. Is like it doesn't have to be coming from me. It's like if what can we do to put you in the best spot? Maybe it's working with Mickey, maybe it's working with Hayden, somebody else that's in the powerlifting world to get to that goal. I'm not the guy that you do this program like is going to get you more physically fit for life and hopefully drop some pounds and put on muscle. Like I'm
yeah,
fairly confident in that, but I'm
yeah,
not going to put you on stage in a bodybuilding competition. I don't know the first thing about that because I've never done it. And
yeah.
I think just humbly, like that's not something that I want somebody to kind of entrust me with.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think there's a lot of stuff on social media of, you mentioned it earlier, like this perfect world of perfect eating, perfect training situation coming from a guy who's around distillery and you're probably pretty close to the brewery as well. I don't know if
Oh
it's
yeah.
in the same location. So if you could just, this will be the last thing I ask you because I know you got a family and I want
No,
to be
dude, I got as much time as I love being able to talk to you guys about this
that's
stuff.
all.
So
I
there's
appreciate it.
zero. There's no time cap or anything. Girls are down. We're in good shape. So
Awesome.
yeah.
So just if you could just touch on that, because in a perfect world, again, if you like to enjoy a couple drinks, things like that, but you, especially being around a distillery and a brewery, I'm sure you dabble and and you have to try out your product. So how do you still balance that with your training goals and your body fat goals and
Yep.
all those things?
So that's a loaded question. There's a couple things to it. The one thing that I will say to any dad out there, and this is the this is not really my style from a tough love standpoint, but the one thing that I had to get real with me was us dads ourselves, we control 100% of what we put in our system. 100%. Nobody's force feeding us anything. No one's telling us to eat anything. We control all of it. So if you have a new kid or you are, a dad of a newborn and you're like struggling, you're in the thick of it right now and you can't train, the one thing that you can control, no matter what, is what you eat and what you drink. That is a hard set. Like I will sit on that for the rest of my life because I've been through it. Like you make excuses and you say, well, I'm tired. Pizza's easy. It's like, it is, but you control that, right? Figure it out. Go to the store. When you pick up diapers, pick up 6 pounds of ground turkey. Like figure out a way to control what you're putting in your system. That's something that has really become a huge priority for me is owning that side of it. I come from the spirits world. I've been working in the whiskey and liquor industry for 15, close to damn near 20 years now. And it's something I'm passionate about. But what I personally, in the way that I handle it, and everybody has a different relationship with alcohol. But the way that I look at it is I don't ever want to put myself in a position where I don't have full control of me and my faculties. That's
Mhm.
just my hard set no matter what. I don't have that desire in me to push it past that point. The minute we had our daughter, 1, 2 drink cap, however you want to look at it, like situationally, there's certain times where, different things will come up. You have different situations, celebrations that is different. But, like I enjoy having a beer. I'm a big Guinness guy. Obviously we make the best beer in the world at Treehouse. Like those are things that I enjoy from not just a social standpoint, but, like a cordial standpoint. And when it comes to whiskey, like that's been my world for almost a decade now. Like I love making good whiskey. I love drinking whiskey. I love the experience of it, but it's never to the point of losing control of the stuff that I know that I'm responsible for. And that is something that I've worked very hard in my career to maintain. And like, I think that anybody that knows me in the liquor industry or knows me from that side of the world would say the same thing, that like, that's something that I take pretty seriously, where I still want to enjoy it. But by the same token, you go back to the fat goals. The more alcohol you drink, the harder it is for your system to digest and burn fat and build muscle and do all of it. So like there is that limiting factor with alcohol of like if you have too much, it's going to slow your system down.
Yeah.
And that is something that, the more you learn and the more you learn about the macros and the more you learn about nutrition, you understand what you're doing. And I'm a big fan of, you got to know what you're putting in your system. And I think one of the things that I've worked pretty hard on is understanding, food becomes kind of like flashcards. You know how much protein, you know how many carbs, you know how much fat is in stuff. And if you have an idea of what your targets are, you don't have to necessarily count macros, but the only way you can learn how to eat intuitively or eat that stuff is to actually spend some time counting and understand it. So if you've never done it before, I'm a huge fan of like spending 6 weeks, spending 2 months, spending 4 weeks, something of tracking macros and figuring out what food is. I think the one thing that blows me away is when you talk to guys that think that they're eating enough protein over the course of the day, like, oh yeah, fuck, no, I have 200 grams. So I'm like, all right, track it tomorrow. And you come back and their scorecard's like 75 grams of protein. It's like, what did you think was in a Kit Kat? You know what I mean? Like, and again, the Kit Kat's a bad example, but it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
we all have a kind of inflated idea, but until you start tracking, you track your weights, right? You want to get to that 500-pound deadlift or anything like that, you're tracking weights, you're using RPE, you got to do the same thing for food and nutrition, right? And alcohol does end up getting phased into that. So it's learning more about what all of it is so you understand what you're doing. And then from there you gain the control back of like, this is what I need to do. I know kind of like where my limitations are. I know what I can have. I know what I can't have. I know how many calories are in the beer that we have at the brew house. And you have 3 or 4 of those. That's gonna cook your system. So it's kind of finding the balance of that. But that too, it's just like training. It's that comes with work, and you got to be willing to understand and go into it, and train that side of things so you know what you're putting in your system. But at the end of the day, we control 100% of it, so that's on us.
No, that's great. I love that. It's a great point because everybody gets busy, meal prep, things go out the window. Sometimes you're coaching baseball. The last thing you want to do is cook at night, and you kids, I don't know, some people are going to Wendy's, things like that. There's still I'm not advocating for eating fast food, obviously, but it's realistic. A lot of dads out there have to do it. It's a quick meal. You get your kids like there's still a way to eat healthier at a
Yeah.
fast food restaurant. And to your point, you control 100% of that. Do you get a large soda and add unnecessary calories? Do you get a chili? Like whatever. But there's again, I 100% agree.
Yeah. I say they're tools, not hacks, because hacks are like the path of least resistance. Like if you're looking for a hack, you're just looking for the easy way out. Like find the tools that you can apply and continue to do it. My big thing is prioritize protein. Like if you're stopping for fast food, your meal better be as protein
Heavy.
forward as it possibly can. Chances are it's going to be high in fat with that protein, but you're skipping the fries if you're going high
Yes.
protein on that front. It's just kind of being strategic and making sure that protein is always the priority in that front. But to that point, I'll stay, and I will stay on my word of this. Meredith, we are not meal preppers. We don't spend Sundays putting meals together. What we do is we'll cook extra on a certain night so that it carries over. Like if we're having tacos on Tuesday, we'll cook 3 pounds of ground turkey or 3 pounds of ground beef so that we have extra of it. We don't have stuff in containers. Like that's one thing that we're just not, we don't do. Could we? Absolutely. But it goes back to like, that's going to cut into some time on Sunday that we could do for house projects and all over this. So like in this phase of life, that's not something that we're into, but you do still have to, if you're looking at the week ahead, Sundays are a huge day to kind of figure out what it is when you're going to get your back up against the wall. What do you have? What are the tools in your belt that you're going to use? Like the big one for me is I recently came across this company called Icon Meats out of Wisconsin. You ever heard of those guys?
I have heard about
So
them.
they're,
Yes.
family owned bison elk farm out in Wisconsin, and they do, like high quality, legit meat sticks, and the macros on them are phenomenal. It's like 12 grams of protein and 3 grams of fat for every single stick. It's one of the best that I've seen on the market.
Yes. I'm gonna check
I
that out.
loaded up. Completely outside of now my relationship with them, even before I spent a shitload of money to have those at the brewery in the truck with me when I'm on the road. Like the girls like them. Those are the snacks. So like being able to have those that's in our toolkit of like, are the girls hungry? Am I hungry? Here's a meat stick. And we're not stopping at a gas station. And I can't even count the miles that I've spent on the road in my career trying every single option on the road and like kind of being stuck with your back against the wall. You end up making shit choices just because you feel like in that moment it's the only option you have. the key is getting ahead of it and having the tools with you to be able to do it. Like bringing a gallon, a jug of water every day, having high quality, like protein, like those Icon Meat David protein bars. Those are another good one that are like high in protein, that are, the macros are pretty solid on them. Just trying to game plan, like, all right, what is the worst case scenario for me? If I can't eat, what am I going to do that day? Am I going to stop at a fast food restaurant, or am I going to force myself to fast and get through dinner? Like kind of coming up with a strategic plan for it, but having the tools to kind of be in a situation and know that you're making the right choice for whatever your goals are.
Yeah, so you're not just caught with your pants down trying to figure out.
And listen, when we take the girls to fast food, absolutely. Like we hit Chick-fil-A, we did, like, that's not a question. We're not avoiding all that stuff. But at the same time, when we get in there, I have a pretty solid game plan of like what I'm going to get out of it, and I know what I'm going to sacrifice.
Yeah,
with
absolutely. It. That's awesome, man.
I did my first 72-hour fast of my life about a month ago. That was wild. It taught me a lot about me. It went great, honestly. I don't want to say I loved it, because it was a bitch, but I truly learned a lot, and I felt phenomenal coming out of it. I documented the whole thing on YouTube. It was like my first vlog series. I'd never done that before, but I just wanted to do it for that side of it, to kind of like teach me personally what I could do on limited food. And I was blown away by how great it felt and what I took away from it.
And just water?
I did electrolytes and coffee.
Okay.
But nice. Water, electrolytes, and coffee. Elements, those LMNT. I'd never really had those before until I started doing this. Those are awesome too.
Nice.
Yeah. But I came out of that with a larger understanding of what I'm capable of from a nutrition standpoint. And that really kind of catapulted some long-term strategy for me in terms of the nutrition side of things. I thought that was great. I'd suggest everybody to at least start with like a 24 or 48 every once in a while.
Yeah. I'm definitely, you inspired me. I'll give it a shot.
I was always anti-fast. My old boss, when I worked at WhistlePig, he was big into fasting. And I mean, every time he talked about it, I'm like, dude, get your protein in. There's like enough. I'm not talking about it. And then he finally convinced me to do it. And I was like, all right.
There we go.
You know, I didn't lose any strength. I picked right back up where I left, but like psychologically and physically, it was pretty remarkable feeling it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, you inspired me. I'll give it a shot, Chris.
We're doing it. I'm going to do it after Labor Day.
Okay, I'll join you.
Yeah,
I'll join you in that one. There we
All
go.
of a sudden, like I've become a proponent of fasting. I can't believe I'm saying it out loud or on like a live recording, but it's where we're at.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I'll give it a shot with
you. Not
you.
all the time, just once in a while.
Yeah, there we go. Nice, man. Well, cool, man. I hear my kids upstairs. I'm going to have to put them to bed and awesome. Give them the time, obviously. But I can't thank you enough, man. This was an awesome conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I'm looking forward to doing it again. Hopefully we catch up. I'd love to go hunting with you if you ever want to come up here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. I'm from the Northeast as well.
There. Yeah,
it'd be great to do it. So come down here. Or I head back up Northeast.
That's the best. That's the best part about all of this. I will say is the people that I have connected with and the guys that I've connected with that are of similar mindsets. Like, I got people that are tight with me in this world locally that, we kind of have the mindset, but the amount of guys I've been able to connect with and kind of share conversations like this has made all this dad training stuff worthwhile from the jump. So grateful to be able to talk to you guys and hopefully reach some more guys on here.
Absolutely. We'd love to have you on again. This was awesome, man. I could talk to you all night. This was great. So hopefully we can do this again and be cognizant of your schedule, but I'd love to. And yeah, man. And let's tell everybody where they can find you.
YouTube, Instagram. I don't mess around with TikTok or anything like that. That's another one. Like those two are enough to keep me occupied. But I do all my training through Train Heroic. Those guys out of Denver, Josh and his team are awesome. I truly love everything that they stand for and all of it. So I put everything through Train Heroic. I think it's the best training app on there. It just allows me to link. But dad training on Instagram and YouTube.
That's awesome.
Open book. Right.
Awesome.
I always say it's a team game. We're all in it together at this point. We just got to figure out how to do what we need to for us.
Absolutely. Well, you helped a lot of people tonight, and I appreciate you sharing everything and getting personal, and it means a lot to us. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there. It means a lot to them as well. So
yeah, absolutely. If you're on the other end of this and, anything that we talked about kind of hit home, we're open books. I'd love to hear from you and obviously make the connection. So all training and stuff aside, the door's always open on Instagram. So
awesome, man. I appreciate your time, man. Enjoy your family. Good luck training tomorrow. And we'll talk soon, brother.
Yeah. Fridays are always a big day.
There we go. Nice.
All right, guys. Have a great night.
You too. Take care.